Welcome back, everybody, to another deep dive.
Yeah.
And today, we're going to be looking at Universal Design for Learning.
Or UDL.
Or UDL.
Yeah.
And
Very cool stuff.
I'm excited to dive into this.
Yeah.
We've got the Guidelines 3.0 right here in front of us, and we're going to try to break this down and really sort of tease out some of the coolest parts of it for all of you.
I think what's really fascinating about this is that it really challenges us to think differently about learning.
Okay.
Instead of, kind of trying to squeeze learners into this one-size-fits-all mold.
Right.
It's really asking, how can we proactively design environments that are inclusive and engaging for everyone from the start?
So it's not about fitting the learner to the environment. It's about shaping the environment to fit the learner.
Shaping the environment to fit the learner. And a key part of that is recognizing that learner variability is the norm. We all learn differently. And those differences are something to be celebrated, not ignored.
Okay, so that's a really important point, I think, because one of the biggest misconceptions about UDL is that it's only about accessibility for people with disability.
Right.
Right. And so it's
common misunderstanding.
Yeah.
While UDL certainly addresses accessibility, it goes much broader than that. It's about recognizing that everyone has unique strengths, challenges, backgrounds, preferences when it comes to learning.
Okay, so that begs the question, if we're talking about this incredible diversity of learners, where do we even begin?
Right.
How do we...
Well, the UDL Guidelines 3.0 outline these three core principles to guide us.
Okay.
Multiple means of engagement, multiple means of representation, and multiple means of action and expression.
Okay, 3 principles, got it.
3 principles.
Can you break those down for me?
Yeah.
Let's start with multiple means of engagement.
Okay.
What does that actually mean?
So imagine you're trying to teach someone a new skill. Multiple means of engagement is about tapping into their interests, providing choices, and making the learning relevant to their lives.
Okay.
So you're essentially asking yourself, how can I make this learning experience meaningful and motivating for this individual?
So it's about sparking that sort of intrinsic motivation.
Yes.
That desire to learn.
Absolutely.
Because let's face it, if someone's bored or disengaged, they're not really going to absorb much information anyway.
Precisely. And that's where that second principle comes in.
Okay.
Multiple means of representation.
Okay.
And this is about recognizing we all process information differently.
Right.
Some people learn best through visual aids, others through auditory input, some prefer hands-on experiences.
Right.
UDL encourages us to present information in a variety of ways to cater to these different learning styles and preferences.
So instead of just relying on like a textbook or a lecture, you might offer videos or podcasts, interactive simulations, or even real-world field trips.
You got to think about a history lesson. Instead of just assigning a textbook chapter, you could offer students the option to watch a documentary, listen to a historical podcast, or even create a timeline using digital tools.
Right.
You're providing multiple pathways for them to access and engage with the same information.
That's such a good example.
Yeah.
I like that. And it also makes me realize that UDL isn't just about catering to different learning styles. It's about making learning more dynamic and engaging for everyone.
Absolutely. And that brings us to that third principle.
Okay.
Multiple means of action and expression.
Okay.
This recognizes that not everyone expresses their understanding in the same way.
Okay.
Some people are great writers, others are gifted speakers. Some might shine through artistic expression or hands-on projects.
So it's about giving learners options for how they can demonstrate what they know instead of always relying on that traditional essay or test format.
Yes, exactly. Imagine a science project where students can choose to build a model, write a report, create a video presentation, or even compose a song to demonstrate their understanding of a concept.
Wow.
You're tapping into their individual strengths and allowing them to express their knowledge in a way that feels authentic to them.
Okay. That's a much more inclusive and engaging approach, for sure. But I can already hear some people saying, like, won't all those options just overwhelm learners?
That's a valid concern.
Yeah.
But here's the key. UDL isn't about throwing a million options at learners and saying, figure it out.
Right.
It's about providing a thoughtful selection of options that are aligned with the learning goals and the learner's needs.
So it's about providing choices, but within a structured framework.
Exactly. And that structure is crucial for helping learners feel safe and supported.
Gotcha.
as they navigate their options and make choices about their learning.
Okay. I'm starting to see how these three principles, engagement, representation, and action and expression, really work together to create a more inclusive and effective learning experience.
And when these principles are implemented effectively, they can lead to something truly remarkable: learner agency.
Learner agency. Okay. That sounds very powerful. Can you explain what that means?
So imagine a classroom where students are not just passively absorbing information, but actively shaping their own learning experience. They're setting goals, making choices, seeking out resources, and taking ownership of their educational journey. That's learner agency in action.
So it's about empowering learners to become self-directed, strategic,
Yes,
and resilient.
exactly. And UDL provides a framework for fostering those essential skills.
This is really making me think back to all the times I felt frustrated or disengaged as a learner.
Yeah.
What if I'd had more choices or more opportunities to express myself in a way that felt authentic to me?
That's a great reflection.
Yeah.
And it highlights how UDL isn't just about academic content. It's about the whole learning experience, including the emotional and social aspects.
That's really interesting. This has been so insightful.
Yeah.
I feel like we've just sort of scratched the surface of UDL.
Yeah.
But I'm already seeing its potential.
Yeah. We've definitely laid a solid foundation.
Yeah.
Now that we've explored those three core principles and the concept of learner agency, I think it would be great to dive into some real-world examples of how UDL is being implemented in different settings.
That's what I'm excited to hear about.
Yeah.
So let's move on to part 2 of our deep dive.
Let's do it. So, as we kind of dive deeper into these UDL guidelines, you'll notice a strong emphasis on fostering these higher-order thinking skills.
Okay.
It's not just about absorbing facts. It's about developing the mental tools you need to analyze, synthesize, and apply information in meaningful ways.
So we've talked about learner agency, and that definitely requires some serious thinking skills.
Yeah.
What are some specific ways that UDL can help to cultivate those?
So one key strategy is helping learners connect prior knowledge to new information. Instead of just presenting new concepts in isolation, UDL encourages us to kind of build bridges between what learners already know and what they're about to learn.
So it's about making those connections explicit.
Exactly.
Showing learners how this new information
Yeah.
fits into their existing,
Right.
sort of.
Yeah, think about using a KWL chart. You ask learners, what do you already know about this topic?
Right.
What do you want to know? And at the end, what have you learned?
Yeah.
It's a simple but powerful way to activate prior knowledge and set the stage for meaningful learning.
I see how that could really help learners make sense of new information.
Yeah.
See how it relates to what they
Absolutely.
say.
And speaking of making connections, the UDL guidelines also emphasize the power of analogies and metaphors.
Oh, I love
A well-chosen analogy
Yeah.
can take a complex concept and make it instantly relatable.
It's like taking something abstract and giving it a concrete form.
Yes.
Like comparing UDL to a toolbox.
Yes.
Filled with different tools for different learning tasks.
That's a great example, and it highlights another key aspect of UDL, providing multiple means of representation.
Okay.
We've already touched on this with offering both text and visuals, but it goes even deeper than that.
Okay.
Think about providing text-to-speech options,
Right.
highlighting key vocabulary, or offering visual organizers to help learners break down complex information.
So it's about anticipating those potential stumbling blocks
Yeah.
and providing supports to help learners overcome them.
Exactly. And these supports aren't just for learners with disabilities. They can benefit anyone who's grappling with a new concept
Right.
or trying to decode unfamiliar language.
It's like building in those extra steps and handrails
Yeah.
to make sure everyone can access the information,
Yeah.
regardless of their background or learning style.
Now, while we're talking about supporting learners, the UDL guidelines also place a lot of emphasis on fostering those executive function skills we talked about earlier. Things like setting goals, planning, organizing information, monitoring progress, and regulating emotions.
You mentioned checklists earlier.
Yes.
How do those tie into executive function skills?
Think about providing a checklist for breaking down a complex project into smaller, more manageable steps.
Okay.
This helps learners develop planning and organizational skills, which are essential for self-directed learning.
So instead of feeling overwhelmed by this big project, they can kind of break it down into bite-sized pieces.
Exactly.
And feel a sense of accomplishment as they check off each step.
And those small wins can boost motivation and build confidence, which are crucial for staying engaged and persevering through challenges.
What about mentoring or coaching? How does that fit into the picture?
Mentors can model effective learning strategies, provide personalized feedback, and offer encouragement when learners hit a roadblock. It's like having a guide on the side, helping you navigate the learning process and develop those essential executive function skills.
So it's not just about providing tools and resources. It's about creating that supportive learning environment.
A supportive learning environment where learners feel empowered to ask for help and learn from others.
Right. It's amazing to see how all these pieces kind of fit together, the cognitive skills, the emotional and social aspects, the tools and supports, that sense of agency and ownership over learning. It's a really holistic approach.
Yeah.
That recognizes the complexity of the learning process.
And speaking of complexity,
okay,
the UDL guidelines also encourage us to think about how we present complex information and ideas to learners.
Okay.
It's not just about breaking things down into smaller chunks. It's about helping learners see the connections and patterns that make up the bigger picture.
Can you give me an example?
Imagine you're teaching a concept like ecosystems.
Okay.
Instead of just listing the different components of an ecosystem. Right. You could create a concept map that visually represents the relationships between those components. The producers, the consumers, the decomposers, the flow of energy, the cycling of matter.
So it's about moving beyond memorizing facts and definitions and actually seeing how those pieces fit together to create this dynamic system.
Precisely. And when learners can see those connections, they develop a deeper understanding of the concept and are better able to apply that knowledge to new situations.
That makes a lot of sense. It's like the difference between seeing a bunch of individual puzzle pieces and seeing how those pieces fit together to create a complete image.
And just like there are multiple ways to solve a puzzle, there are multiple ways to understand and make meaning of information.
Right.
UDL encourages us to embrace those diverse perspectives and approaches.
So it's not about finding the one right answer. It's about exploring different ways of knowing and understanding.
Exactly. And that open-minded approach to learning is essential for navigating a world that's increasingly complex and interconnected.
This is making me think about how we often assess learning. If we're embracing these multiple perspectives and approaches, does that mean we need to rethink our assessment methods as well?
That's a great question. And the UDL guidelines definitely address the need for flexible and authentic assessment practices.
Okay.
Instead of relying solely on traditional tests and quizzes.
Right.
UDL encourages us to offer a variety of ways for learners to demonstrate their understanding: projects, presentations, portfolios, performances, even self-reflections.
So it's about matching the assessment method to the learning goals, the learner's strengths and preferences.
Exactly. And when we do that, we create a more accurate and meaningful picture of what learners know and are able to do.
You know, as we're talking about assessment, it makes me wonder about the role of feedback in UDL. How do we provide feedback in a way that's both supportive and helpful for learners?
That's a crucial aspect of UDL.
Yeah.
Effective feedback is timely, specific, and focused on helping learners grow and improve. It's about recognizing their efforts, highlighting their strengths, and offering guidance on areas where they can develop further.
So it's not just about pointing out what's wrong. It's about providing that constructive criticism that helps learners learn from their mistakes and move forward.
And when feedback is delivered in that spirit, it can be incredibly motivating and empowering for learners.
This conversation is really making me rethink my own assumptions about learning. I'm starting to see how UDL is about so much more than just accommodating different learners. It's about creating truly optimal learning environments for everyone.
I completely agree. And the beauty of UDL is that it's a flexible framework that can be applied in countless ways.
Right.
From designing online courses to creating more inclusive workplaces.
This deep dive has been so eye-opening. I'm starting to see how UDL is about setting learners up for success in a really holistic way by fostering their cognitive skills, nurturing their emotional and social well-being, providing tools and support, and empowering them to take ownership over their learning journey.
You've captured it perfectly. And a lot of that success stems from cultivating those higher-order thinking skills, encouraging learners to think critically, creatively, and strategically. The guidelines talk about the importance of highlighting patterns and relationships in information, promoting multiple ways of knowing and making meaning, and maximizing the transfer and generalization of learning.
Okay. There are a lot of layers to unpack there.
Yeah.
What does it mean to highlight patterns and relationships?
Think about it this way. Experts in any field are able to see connections and patterns that novices might miss.
Okay.
So by explicitly highlighting those connections for learners, we can help them develop that expert-level understanding.
So it's like giving them a behind-the-scenes look at how the experts think.
Exactly. And by cultivating multiple ways of knowing and making meaning, UDL encourages learners to think beyond just one right answer or one right way of understanding something.
Right.
It's about embracing diverse perspectives and approaches.
This is making me realize that UDL is really about challenging those traditional assumptions about learning.
Yeah.
Those ideas that there's only one right way to learn or one right answer to every question.
Absolutely. And it's about creating learning environments that are open to exploration, experimentation, and even a little bit of healthy disagreement.
So it's not about stifling creativity and individuality.
Right.
It's about nurturing those qualities
Exactly.
and helping learners develop their own unique ways of understanding the world.
And that brings us to the concept of maximizing transfer and generalization.
Okay.
This is about helping learners see how the knowledge and skills they're acquiring can be applied in different contexts,
Right.
beyond just the specific situation in which they're learning.
So it's about making the learning relevant and applicable
Exactly.
beyond just the classroom walls,
Yes.
helping them see how they can use what they're learning in real-world situations.
Precisely. The guidelines suggest offering multiple opportunities for practice, providing prompts for applying learning to real-world situations, and even using simulations and role-playing to help learners see how their knowledge can be transferred.
I'm really impressed with how thorough and thoughtful these UDL guidelines are.
Yeah.
It's clear that a lot of research and expertise went into creating them.
Absolutely. And they're constantly being refined and updated based on new research and insights from the field.
That's great. This deep dive has been incredibly eye-opening. I'm starting to see how UDL is about so much more than just accommodating different learners. It's about creating truly optimal learning environments for everyone.
I completely agree. And the beauty of UDL is that it's a flexible framework that can be applied in countless ways, from designing online courses to creating more inclusive workplaces.
We've covered a lot of ground today.
We have.
But there's still one more aspect of the UDL guidelines that I want to touch on: emotional capacity.
Oh, yeah.
It's not something we usually think about when we talk about learning,
Right.
but the guidelines suggest that it's crucial for success.
You're right. That's a really important point.
Yeah.
And often overlooked.
Yeah.
Emotional capacity encompasses things like self-regulation, motivation, resilience, empathy, and social skills. These are the skills that help learners navigate challenges, stay engaged, and collaborate effectively with others.
So it's not just about the cognitive aspects of learning, it's about the whole learner,
Yes.
including their emotional well-being.
Exactly. And the UDL guidelines offer some really insightful strategies for supporting learners' emotional development.
Like what?
Well, for starters, creating learning environments that are welcoming, safe, and supportive is crucial.
Okay.
But it goes beyond that. The guidelines talk about the importance of helping learners understand and regulate their own emotions,
Okay.
build positive relationships with others, and develop coping mechanisms for dealing with stress and frustration.
So it's about giving them the tools they need to not only learn effectively,
Yes.
but also to thrive emotionally in a world that can be pretty challenging at times.
That's a great way to summarize it. And the research shows that when learners feel emotionally supported, they're more likely to be engaged, motivated, and successful in their learning.
This has been such a rich discussion. I'm really starting to see UDL in a whole new light.
Yeah.
It's not just a set of guidelines.
Right.
It's a philosophy of learning that's grounded in research, empathy, and a deep understanding of human variability.
I couldn't have said it better myself, and I think one of the most exciting things about UDL is that it's constantly evolving as we learn more about the brain, about learning, and about the diverse needs of learners.
So this is just the beginning of the journey, so to speak.
Exactly. The more we embrace UDL principles, the more we can create learning environments that are truly transformative for everyone.
Okay. I'm officially inspired.
Yeah.
But before we get carried away with all the possibilities,
Yeah.
I want to make sure that we'll circle back to some of those practical examples from the UBL guidelines
Yes.
that we touched on earlier.
Yeah.
You know, we talked about things like checklists. But what are some other real-world examples of how UDL is being put into action?
That's a great question, and there are so many fantastic examples out there. One that comes to mind is the use of multimedia for communication.
Okay.
Instead of just requiring students to write essays or give presentations,
Right.
UDL encourages educators to offer a wider range of options for expression, such as creating videos, podcasts, graphic novels, even dances or musical performances.
That's awesome. It not only allows learners to tap into their individual strengths and interests,
Yes.
but it also exposes everyone to these different ways of thinking and communicating.
Exactly.
It's like creating a much more vibrant and dynamic learning environment.
Exactly. And it also helps break down those traditional barriers that have often limited certain learners. For example, a student who struggles with writing might excel at creating a video or composing a piece of music.
It's about recognizing and valuing the unique talents and abilities that each learner brings to the table.
Absolutely. And it's about creating spaces where everyone feels empowered to learn and grow in their own way.
I love that. Okay, so multimedia for communication is one example.
Yeah.
What are some others?
Another powerful example is the use of assistive technology and accessible materials.
Okay.
The UDL guidelines emphasize the importance of providing tools and resources that support learners with disabilities.
Right.
But these tools can benefit everyone.
Like text-to-speech software screen readers and alternative keyboards.
Those are all great examples, and increasingly these tools are becoming more integrated into everyday devices and software, which is fantastic. But it's not just about having access to the tools. It's about creating a culture where using these tools is seen as normal and empowering.
So it's about shifting the mindset from accommodation to access for all.
Exactly. And by doing that, we create learning environments that are more inclusive, equitable, and ultimately more effective for everyone.
This makes me realize that even something as simple as offering flexible seating arrangements in a classroom can be an example of UDL in action.
Absolutely. It's about recognizing that learners have different physical needs and preferences,
Right.
and providing options that allow them to learn comfortably and effectively. Some learners might focus best at a traditional desk. Others might prefer a comfy chair or a standing desk. Some might need to move around or take breaks more frequently. It's all about creating a space that supports individual needs.
I'm starting to see UDL everywhere now.
I know, right?
It's like those hidden pictures where you suddenly realize there's so much more going on than you initially perceived.
That's a great analogy. UDL is all about shifting our perspective, opening our minds to the diverse needs of learners, and designing environments that are flexible, supported, and engaging for everyone.
Okay, well, this deep dive has been incredibly enriching.
It has.
I feel like I've gained a whole new understanding of UDL and its potential to transform learning, but I know we've only just scratched the surface.
You're right. There's so much more to explore, and the UDL Guidelines 3.0 are a fantastic resource for anyone who wants to dive deeper.
I'm already looking forward to the next deep dive.
Me too.
Yeah.
And I think for our next episode, we should tackle some of those common myths and misconceptions that often get in the way of UDL's widespread adoption.
That's a great idea. We'll bust some myths and challenge some long-held assumptions about learning, so get ready for a lively discussion. Welcome back to the deep dive. We're wrapping up our exploration of universal design for learning, and as promised, we're going to tackle some of the myths and misconceptions that often surround UDL.
Yeah.
You might be surprised how often these myths pop up even among people who are really passionate about education.
It's true. These myths can be persistent, and they often stem from a lack of understanding of what UDL is truly about.
One of the biggest myths I hear is that UDL is only for students with disabilities.
Right.
It's like people think it's just another form of special education.
Right. And we've already touched on how that's not the case at all.
Yeah.
UDL benefits all learners because it
Right.
acknowledges that we all have unique strengths, challenges, and preferences when it comes to learning.
It's like recognizing that human beings come in all shapes and sizes, and our brains are no different.
Right.
We have these diverse ways of processing information, engaging with the world, and expressing what we know.
Exactly. And when we embrace that diversity, we create learning environments that are not only more inclusive, but also more engaging, challenging, and ultimately more successful for everyone.
Okay, so myth number 1, busted.
Busted.
What's another common misconception about UDL?
Another big one is that UDL lowers expectations or waters down the curriculum.
Okay.
People sometimes worry that if you're offering multiple means of engagement, representation, and action and expression, you're essentially making things easier.
I can see how that concern might arise.
Yeah,
I'm guessing you're going to tell me that's not what UDL is about?
you're absolutely right. UDL isn't about lowering the bar. It's about providing different pathways to reach the same high standards.
Okay.
The learning goals remain the same. The rigor remains the same. But the ways in which learners can access and engage with that content become more flexible and varied.
So, for example, if you're teaching a complex mathematical concept,
Right.
you might offer multiple ways for learners to grasp that concept
Exactly.
through visual representations or hands-on manipulatives or even real-world applications.
Exactly. You're still expecting them to master the concept, but you're providing different tools and supports to help them get there.
That makes a lot of sense. It's like
Yeah.
building a house. You wouldn't just give everyone a hammer and expect them to figure it out on their own.
Yeah.
You'd provide a variety of tools and guidance
Yeah.
based on their individual skills and experience.
I love that analogy.
Yeah.
And just as you wouldn't expect everyone to build the exact same house, you wouldn't expect every learner to demonstrate their understanding in the exact same way.
Okay, so myth number 2, busted.
Busted.
What's another misconception we should tackle? I have a feeling there are a few more lurking out there.
Oh, there are definitely a few more. This one's a bit more subtle, but I hear it quite often.
Yeah.
The idea that UDL is just a bunch of extra work for teachers.
Yeah. I can see how that perception might arise. It might seem like offering all these options and supports would be incredibly time-consuming.
It's true that implementing UDL thoughtfully does require some upfront planning and effort, but the long-term benefits far outweigh that initial investment.
So how do those benefits kind of play out in the classroom?
Well, for starters, when learners are more engaged and successful, they're less likely to need remediation or extra support down the road.
Right.
You're essentially preventing problems before they even arise by proactively addressing those potential barriers to learning.
That makes sense. It's like investing in preventative health care.
Yeah.
You might spend a little more time and effort up front, but
Yeah.
you're ultimately saving yourself a lot of trouble down the line.
Exactly. And as teachers become more familiar with UDL principles, they often find that they're able to streamline their planning and instruction
Okay.
because they're focusing on creating flexible resources and activities that can be adapted for a variety of learners.
So it's not about creating a separate lesson plan for every single student.
Yeah.
It's about designing learning experiences that are inherently flexible and adaptable.
You got it. It's
Yeah.
about creating a rich learning environment that can be personalized to meet individual needs. And technology can play a huge role in making that happen. Think about digital textbooks that offer text-to-speech, customizable font sizes, and built-in dictionaries.
Yeah.
Those features benefit everyone, not just learners with disabilities.
It's like designing a website with accessibility features built in from the start.
Right.
Everyone benefits from a clear layout, easy navigation, and alternative ways to access the content.
Exactly. And when we design learning environments with that kind of inclusivity in mind, we create a more welcoming and equitable experience for everyone.
So it's not just about improving individual outcomes, it's about creating a more just and equitable learning environment for all.
That's exactly what UDL is all about. It's about ensuring that everyone has the opportunity to reach their full potential, regardless of their background, their strengths, their challenges, or their learning preferences.
I'm so glad we had the chance to debunk some of those UDL myths today. It's clear to me that UDL is a powerful framework for creating learning environments that are not only inclusive, but also more effective, engaging, and equitable.
I agree.
I feel like I've learned so much from this deep dive.
Me too. And I think the most important thing to remember is that UDL is a journey, not a destination.
Okay.
It's about constantly learning, experimenting, and refining our approaches to create learning experiences that are truly transformative for everyone.
And that journey can be incredibly rewarding, both for educators and for learners. I'm feeling so inspired to learn more about UDL and to start incorporating these principles into my own life and work. And who knows, maybe we'll even inspire some of our listeners to do the same.
That's what we're hoping for. Because ultimately, UDL is about creating a world where everyone has the opportunity to learn, grow, and thrive.
Well, on that note of possibility and hope, we're going to wrap up this deep dive into universal design for learning. Thank you so much for joining us on this journey. We hope you've gained some new insights and are feeling inspired to explore the world of UDL further. And remember, the learning never stops.